Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck by Mark Manson.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is. And I think, just from the title, we might expect something different from what the book's actually about.
Right, because it's not about just not caring about anything.
Yeah, it's not apathy.
Right.
It's more about, figuring out what's important and then really focusing your energy on that and not getting distracted by everything else.
Yeah, and he's got some really interesting stories in there. Like, he uses Charles Bukowski as an example of somebody who kind of found success by not following the typical path to fame.
That's so interesting because, we are kind of constantly bombarded with messages about, chase happiness, chase success. And it seems like Bukowski just kind of did his own thing and people kind of came to him.
Right. He just focused on his craft. And ironically, I think that's kind of what made people pay attention to him.
Yeah. So it's almost like he found success by not, chasing it directly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where his law of avoidance comes in.
Okay.
Where he argues that constantly chasing these positive experiences like happiness can actually backfire.
Really?
Because if you're always striving for something that you lack, you're constantly reinforcing the fact that you don't have it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of a mind game a little bit.
Yeah. So this is how this ties into, not giving a feck, but how do we break free from this, this constant chase?
Well, he talks about needing to step off what he calls the hedonic treadmill.
Okay.
And that's the idea that we're constantly adapting to pleasure, so we need more and more to feel satisfied.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so if you think about running on a treadmill, you're putting in all this effort, but you're not actually getting anywhere.
Right.
And he also says one way to kind of step off that treadmill is to stop buying into the idea that we're all so unique.
Okay, but wait, doesn't he say we are all unique?
Yeah.
I'm a little confused.
Well, it's more nuanced than that. It's not that we're not unique individuals. It's more about challenging that societal obsession with everybody being extraordinary,
Okay.
which can lead to a sense of entitlement
I see.
and an inability to cope with challenges.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's less about denying our individuality and more about recognizing that everybody goes through stuff.
Exactly.
We got challenges.
Yeah, and this kind of brings in the concept of dukkha, which is a Buddhist term. I'm not Buddhist, but I like this concept, which basically acknowledges that suffering is a natural part of life.
Yeah.
We all experience difficulties, setbacks, frustrations, all that stuff.
So instead of trying to avoid or deny those things,
Right.
we should just accept that they're going to happen.
Exactly. That some suffering is unavoidable. And by accepting that, we can kind of stop giving a feck about the things that we can't control.
Okay, so it frees us from that constant fighting against reality.
Exactly. And allows us to focus our energy on the things that we can actually influence.
That makes sense. But if we're not chasing, happiness, we're not chasing success, what should we be focusing on? What gives our lives, meaning and direction?
Well, he argues that it all comes down to our values.
Okay.
And he compares life to the scientific method,
Interesting.
where our values are our hypotheses,
Right.
our actions are the experiments,
I love that.
and the outcomes are our data.
So it's not about just blindly chasing some external measure of success or happiness. It's figuring out what matters to you and then using your actions to kind of test and refine those values.
Exactly. And he uses, to illustrate this, he has this powerful anecdote of these Japanese soldiers who continued fighting World War II
What?
for decades after it ended.
Wow.
Simply because they lacked the correct information.
Oh.
They had incredible strength and motivation.
Yeah.
But they were fighting for a lost cause because their guiding principle was based on outdated information.
Wow. That's a really good example of how important it is to have, the right values guiding our actions.
Right.
Because you could be putting a lot of energy, in the wrong direction.
Right. And so to kind of highlight this further, he contrasts the stories of two musicians,
Okay.
Dave Mustaine and Pete Best.
I don't know those names.
So Dave Mustaine was kicked out of Metallica right before they got hugely successful.
Ouch.
Yeah. And so he went on to form his own band, Megadeth. And he's achieved a lot of success, but he's continued to measure his worth against his former bandmates.
Oh, so even though he's successful, his value system is kind of holding him back.
Exactly.
Ah.
And on the other hand, you have Pete Best,
Okay.
who was famously replaced as the drummer for the Beatles.
Oh.
But he chose to focus on his love of music.
Okay.
And, he's continued to play and ultimately found happiness and fulfillment, even though he wasn't in one of the most famous bands in history.
So it's like the same challenge, but two very different outcomes based on their values. This is making me think like, what are my values? And are they leading me towards, a fulfilling life, or are they holding me back?
Yeah, that's a powerful question to ask yourself. And he actually provides some guidance on how to distinguish between good and bad values.
Okay, how do we do that?
So good values, he argues, are grounded in reality, achieved internally, and contribute positively to the world around you.
So give me an example.
Like honesty would be a good value because it leads to actions that are, aligned with reality. It's something that you cultivate within yourself, and it generally benefits those around you.
Okay, that makes sense.
Huh.
What would be a bad value?
A bad value might be something like seeking external validation.
Okay.
So that can lead you to chase fleeting approval from others.
Oh, yeah.
Which is often based on, external factors that you can't control, and it doesn't necessarily contribute anything positive.
Okay. So it's about, identifying values that are rooted in internal fulfillment and positive action rather than chasing this external approval or constantly comparing ourselves to others.
Exactly.
This is really making me rethink some things.
Good. And that's exactly what he wants us to do. He wants us to examine our values, see if they're truly serving us or holding us back. And once we've kind of identified those values, the next step is taking responsibility for how they manifest in our lives. So taking responsibility, that's a key theme in the book.
Okay.
And he shares the story of William James, who was a famous psychologist.
All right.
And, really turned his life around by taking radical responsibility for everything.
Everything. Like even things that weren't his fault. I mean, sometimes things happen that are just out of our control, right?
Yeah, of course you can't control every external event. But what James realized was he could control his reactions to them.
Oh, okay.
And that was a huge shift in perspective for him.
Oh,
allowed him to channel his energy into positive change, not just for himself, but for others through his work.
So instead of being a victim, you can choose how to respond.
Exactly. And that's what taking responsibility is all about. It's not blaming yourself for everything.
Right.
It's about recognizing your power to choose your response.
Okay.
And sometimes the most empowering response is to take action.
Oh, yeah?
Even if you don't feel ready or motivated.
This reminds me of his do something principle.
Oh, yes.
Where he talks about his high school math teacher who would tell the students, just start working on a problem.
Right.
Even if you don't know the answer yet, just start.
It's such a good principle because it breaks us out of that cycle of procrastination.
Yeah.
And waiting for the perfect moment.
Oh, yeah.
Think about a time when you were feeling stuck in a rut, maybe feeling unmotivated, overwhelmed. Chances are just taking even a small step helped you gain momentum.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes that's the hardest part is just to get started. Yeah, exactly.
It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Exactly.
So true.
And taking action is also a great way to step off that hedonic treadmill.
Oh, okay.
Instead of constantly seeking external validation or waiting for the perfect feeling.
Right.
We could focus on what we can control, our actions.
So stop giving a feck about feeling, perfectly motivated and start giving a feck about just showing up and doing the work.
Yeah, and it might be messy. It might be imperfect.
Yeah.
But you're doing it.
Right.
And that also means, learning to say no to things that don't align with those values.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one.
Saying no creates space for us to say a resounding yes to the things that truly matter.
Oh, I like that.
It's about setting boundaries and protecting our energy.
Yeah, this is so important, but sometimes it can be hard to say no.
Yeah, especially when we're worried about, disappointing others or missing out.
But think about it this way. When you say yes to everything, you're essentially spreading yourself thin. You're giving your power away.
Yeah.
Letting external demands dictate your priorities.
So saying no is really about, taking back control of your time and your attention.
Exactly.
So that you can, direct those things towards stuff that really brings you joy.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's incredibly liberating to free yourself from obligations and commitments that just drain you.
Yeah.
And it allows you to fully engage with the pursuits that are, really meaningful.
Well, since we're talking about letting go of things that don't serve us, let's talk about embracing failure.
Yes.
Because this is where it seems like he kind of flips the script on, conventional self-help advice where it's always avoid failure at all costs.
Yeah. He actually argues that it's essential for growth. Think about any expert in any field. Whether it's an athlete, a musician, a scientist, they've all reached that mastery through countless failures.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's almost like those setbacks, those moments where we stumble, are actually what lead us to greater skill and understanding.
Exactly. Failure helps us refine our approach,
Huh.
identify areas for improvement,
Okay.
and ultimately become more resilient.
So instead of being afraid to fail, we can look at those failures as an opportunity to learn.
Precisely.
Okay.
And it also ties into his emphasis on constantly questioning our beliefs and assumptions.
Okay.
What we believe to be true today might be proven wrong tomorrow.
Yeah, that's true.
Look how much our understanding of the world has changed.
Yeah.
We used to think the world was flat.
It's kind of humbling when you think about it.
It is.
That we don't have all the answers and that our current perspective, might be limited.
Right. But it's also exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Because it means there's always more to learn and discover.
So how do we stay open to that?
Well, he actually provides some thought-provoking questions to help us kind of challenge our beliefs and stay open.
Okay.
He asks, what if I'm wrong?
What if I'm wrong?
What would it mean if I were wrong?
Okay.
Would being wrong create a better or worse problem than my current problem?
Wow. Those are really good questions.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
so easy to get stuck in your own head and think you're right
Yeah.
and not even consider other perspectives.
Right. And that's where the concept of ego comes in.
Oh, yeah.
The more we identify with our beliefs and opinions,
Mm-hmm.
the harder it becomes to grow and change.
Okay.
He suggests we need to kind of loosen our grip
Loosen our grip.
on our sense of self to
Can you?
become more flexible in the face of new information.
So if we're too attached to who we think we are, we're not open to growing and changing.
Exactly.
Oh.
He even challenges us to ask ourselves, who would I be without this belief?
Oh, wow.
What else might be possible if I let go of this rigid definition of myself?
Those are some deep questions.
They are.
And it all kind of points back to, this idea of choosing what you give a feck about. If we can detach from that need to be right all the time, from the fear of failure, from that need for external validation, then we can really focus on what truly matters.
It's about consciously deciding, what values you want to guide your life,
Right.
goals you want to pursue, what kind of impact you want to make.
And then taking action.
Yes.
Even if it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And the learning from the results.
Exactly.
I really like how he emphasizes that we're always choosing what to give a feck about.
Oh, yeah.
Whether we realize it or not, every decision we make,
Reflects our values.
yeah, is powerful.
Yeah, it is.
That we have more agency than we realize.
Yeah, you can choose what you focus on,
Okay.
how you respond to those challenges, and ultimately what kind of life you create.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck, I'm curious, what are some of the key takeaways that really stuck with you?
Well, I think just that central message is so powerful, right? It's not about being indifferent or apathetic. It's about being selective with our energy, and our attention.
Yeah, he says early on in the book, not giving a feck does not mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable being different.
Yes, exactly. And that takes a lot of self-awareness,
It does.
to really be honest with ourselves about what we truly value.
Yeah, and then the hard part is, letting go of the things that maybe don't fit into that picture.
Yeah, because, our time and our energy are precious.
They are.
You can't do it all, and you shouldn't try to.
Yeah, you end up burning yourself out.
Yeah, exactly.
And he also talks about how sometimes not giving a feck about certain things actually requires giving a feck about something bigger, something more meaningful.
Yeah, you got to find that driving force, that passion that fuels you to kind of overcome challenges.
Yeah. It's different for everybody.
It is.
What lights me up might not light you up.
Right, exactly.
And that's okay.
And that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
It's about figuring out what makes you pick,
Yeah.
what gets you excited, and then pursuing that.
And he says, whether you realize it or not, you are always choosing what to give a feck about.
Yeah, it's true.
Every decision reflects those choices.
It does.
So are we making the choices that are, aligned with the life we want to create?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I'd like to leave everyone with a little challenge.
Okay, I like it.
What is one thing you can start giving less of a feck about today?
Ooh, that's good. Is it that voice of self-doubt? The pressure to be perfect?
Whatever it is, just imagine, what could open up if you chose to release that and really focus on what matters.
Well, this has been an incredibly thought-provoking deep dive, and I think we can all benefit from, taking some of these ideas and putting them into practice in our own lives.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the subtle art of not giving a feck.
It's been fun.
It has.
Yeah.
And we hope you walk away, feeling empowered to create a life that is authentic and fulfilling and truly your own fate.